Hello, I'm Michael Pierce, and this is The Human Condition. Today, our topic is the best gift to yourself during this Christmas and New Year's holiday season. In the States, we've got a Christmas season coming up and New Year's for the Western calendar. And I'd like to talk about the best gifts you could give yourself or loved ones for health for this new year. And so those are a very short list of things that you can do to find out what's going on with yourself. And I think that one of the best things to do is run over to a gym and get a professional to measure your body fat percentage. If you're not used to using calipers or you're not used to using an electrical device, you might want to get some professional to help you. Most gyms will do a body fat percentage for you. And if you can do a body fat percentage either with calipers on multiple sites throughout your body where you just pinch and see how much body fat there is under your skin. The other one is to use an electrical measure. If you use the electrical measures, they're not terribly accurate, but it'd be better to use an upper body and a lower body and average the two values. So what that means is you grab onto a device that looks like a steering wheel and it runs electric current through your upper body, very little bit. And the other one is you stand on a scale that runs electric current through your feet and legs. You have to be barefoot. You have to have your hands bare when you grip these things. So whether you're gripping the one or standing on the other, you have to have clean, lotion-free hands. You don't want to have any lotion on your hands or your feet. And you get your body fat percentage calculated by the electrical resistance. That's very useful to know. It's even more important than weight loss is to know your body fat percentage. The next thing would be to get a complete blood count and a biochemistry profile and a standard urine analysis. These are pretty simple and they go for around $100. They are done at places like Any Lab Test Now and other types of things around the country where you can go in by yourself without a doctor and get a lab test. You can order a CBC, which is called a complete blood count. What that means is it measures all the different kinds of cells, the red blood cells, the white blood cells, and the platelets. And it breaks down the different kinds of red blood cells and their measurements and their sizes and shapes or morphologies, and all the different kinds of white cells. You can use this to figure out what's going on with your health and begin to understand just how healthy and well or sick you might be, and if you've got a body that's well enough to do some of the interventions that I talk about on this channel. Because the CBC and biochem profile are things that the doctor would use to figure out if you're healthy enough to try a different diet. Chemical profile, or the chemistry profile, or what used to be called the Chem 20 or SMAC 20 or biochemistry profile, is a little different than the CBC. The CBC is a bunch of cells. It's a bunch of measurements of cells and their shapes. The biochemistry profile is a measure of enzymes and electrolytes and chemistry that is not cells to measure different systems like your pancreas and gallbladder, your bile, your kidney, your heart, your muscle tissue, to find out if there are some glaring problems with that kind of stuff. And then the urine analysis is not a high-tech kind of thing. It's a very simple, inexpensive spot urine analysis where you just collect urine, and the urine is measured for protein, it's measured for sugar, it's measured for casts or junk that's formed from the kidneys if they were infected. It looks at blood, it looks at white cells, it looks at specific gravity to try to find out how dense that urine is compared to water. And these are ways that you and your doctor can figure out, with or without your doctor, if you are healthy enough to try certain diets and certain changes and other types of cleanses that might be good for you. Or if you've got another problem that demands more attention and you shouldn't be worrying about diet, you should be going to the doctor and getting treated. These tests ideally would include some total cholesterol and other cholesterol or lipid panels and fasting glucose and a couple of other measures that should be done with you fasting. And that means 12 hours before the collection, you should have stopped eating anything and drinking anything except water. Usually most people schedule these for the morning so that they can go to bed after dinner, wake up the next morning, not eat breakfast, go right to the lab, get their blood drawn from their vein in their arm, and then have the results sent. And usually these results come back within a day or two, and many times they're done electronically. You can also order these from your holistic doctor if you've got a therapist or a chiropractor or a naturopath or some other kind of natural doctor. They might use something like Rupa Health, which is an aggregator of a bunch of different laboratories, and the doctor can then order all kinds of different labs for you and put them together in this one system, and then they can help you go over it. Some of you are a lot more do-it-yourselfers, and some of you need your doctor to varying degrees, so I have to kind of address this for all different layers of people and levels of people. The other thing that I think that's important for a gift to yourself in this holiday season is to go to your chiropractor and get a spinal x-ray. If you've never had a spinal x-ray and you've got symptoms, and you've been getting treatments or not getting treatments, and you're not really sure what's going on, Spinal x-rays are really low radiation these days, extremely low because of the power and capacity of these different systems now. We use sensors, and we don't even use film anymore, so they're extremely sensitive, and they use far less radiation than even they used to in the past, which was still pretty safe. So if a person has problems with their neck or their mid-back or their low back, their pelvis, their extremities, they've never gotten x-rayed, try going to your chiropractor and asking for upright x-rays, where you're standing or sitting upright and you're getting your spine checked. Now, some chiropractors not only will measure you upright instead of laying down, which is good for alignment, but they'll also do a side view of your neck, and they'll do flexion and extension. They'll have you bend forward and back and see in the side view if there's any movement or sliding of the vertebra, which checks for ligament damage. And that gets missed all the time when you go to the typical medical doctor. In addition, some chiropractors will specialize in very specific upper cervical, which means basically the first vertebra of the neck, called the atlas. And they have special machines that are plumbed in 3 dimensions. Most x-ray machines are not really lined up perfectly in order to capture the exact alignment of a person in gravity. And we call that plumb, when a person's measuring exact vertical from the center of the earth. Those would be very specific x-ray machines, and usually when you walk in you can see it because they're in like a rectangle, some kind of cube or rectangle that has got all the edges are all 90 degrees. When you go to your medical doctor, they're not wrong for x-raying you laying down. They x-ray you laying down so that most of your flesh moves aside off of your bones so that there's not as much flesh in front of your bones. And that gives better picture of bones, because when you're a medical doctor and you're taking x-rays, you want to see what the bones look like. You're not really interested in soft tissue, and you're not interested in posture. You're just interested in if the bones are broken or if there's some kind of other abnormality. Chiropractors want to see alignment, and they want to see how you are in gravity and what your posture looks like. And that can be extremely important to figure out issues with regard to your health and your nervous system. The problem is it does mean that there's a little more flesh in the way sometimes, and there's a little less penetrance and a little more scatter radiation. So sometimes there's a real difference between laying down medical x-rays and upright chiropractic x-rays, as well as those specific x-rays. The last 2 things I want to mention are to get an ultrasound of the liver and gallbladder or the abdomen. An ultrasound of the liver and gallbladder or the abdomen is really useful, and it costs about $100 in most places around the United States. It may be slightly more, slightly less, but the doctor just puts some gel on you and puts ultrasound waves to image your upper abdomen. And they're trying to see if your liver and pancreas have fatty liver disease or fatty liver deposition. This fat is much more dangerous than subcutaneous fat. The subcutaneous fat that's under our skin is a lot different than the fat that's in our organs, our visceral organs, around our heart and around our organs, up in our tongue, mostly in our thoracic cavity and our belly area. These abdominal ultrasounds can be useful. You won't see it on x-ray and you won't see it on CT, but you will see it on MRI too, so it can be done with an MRI. You don't need MRI contrast to show this, so you don't need the gadolinium contrast for that particular thing if you're getting an MRI. And then the last one is a cardiac CT scan. Now this one is a lot of radiation, so you have to think about whether you need it or not. But if you've got a family history of like lean people who exercise a lot and drop dead from heart attacks, you really, really want to get this checked. You might also notice that your family has just cardiac deaths otherwise, whether or not they're skinny. It's just harder to identify in the skinny people. You'll find that for the cardiac CT score, it's a CT scan, which is a CAT scan. This is an X-ray that goes all around you like an MRI machine, and it shoots X-rays every time it moves. So it's X-ray, 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 and it takes all those X-rays and puts them together to make a 3D image. Now that's admittedly a lot of X-rays. It can be very useful if you've got a family history of heart disease and sudden death, because this shows the amount of calcium in your cardiac arteries, in your heart arteries, and that infers how much might be in the rest of your body, like in your brain or other organs and different types of development of atherosclerosis and heart disease and other types of things that can be lethal. It can be useful to consider getting this cardiac CT score to find out what your score is, and if it's 0, you're in pretty good shape. Now, even if it's bad, let's say it's 300 or higher, and that's an arbitrary number, but there are different numbers and it'll depend on your health. But if you've got a high number that seems alarming in the literature, if you get a second one done, and they're usually done once a year, if you get a second one done and you're going down, you're at much lower risk, generally, for cardiac events than someone who's going up or staying the same. So we want to make sure that our cardiac CT score is going down if it's bad. That is really exciting because it means that if you have a high score and you've got a family history, if you're going down, in cardiac score, meaning less and less calcium, that means your body's getting healthier and you're cleaning the plaque out of your arteries. This can be done fairly rapidly, and it can be done on any number of diets. The Dean Ornish diet, which was a very vegetarian diet with very low fat, was done, and they were able to reverse plaques in a couple of years. Certainly the carnivore and keto diets, which are quite the opposite. They're very fat-based and very protein-based and not carb-based. Those diets also reduce the plaquing and the calcium score in a number of people. So take a look at Ivor Cummins, take a look at the Fat Emperor, learn more about this and understand why we would do all these scores. These are some of the gifts that I think we could give to ourselves and others during the holiday season.